18 times to show off being from the future and convincing of the magic, like a prodigy. Chapter 2. Ass of Power and the Path of the Node. James really had a strong ass. It was a breathing, living block. You could see it like anti-gravity, something lifted with ease. Doesn't matter how heavy the box was or if you had to relocate your apartment. You could source a lot of power to movement lifting, or pushing it was connected to the bottom. It is a large muscle. Fitting in his full mail, fashionable like you would worry where the skill was. Lacking a morning star he had been practicing so much consistently to auxiliary. His mind had really fitted to bludgeoning, then to racial considering. He had written about a cosmopolitan black Londonman in a time of theory and tolerance through history, but now things were cerebral. There was still racism and stupid people in modern eras, he thought. A struggle that should be won, and people the most tolerant and standards people should have had earlier. What he didn't know was that there were now staunch wizards, just like in the stories. With the visor down, you could not see his melanin. He pretended to be white as cocaine in snowflakes. Would he fight another day, summon the grit, or pretend to be anonymous like an assassin? With my visor down, I can play a two-face game whenever I want, reap the benefits and of manners. There is cunning in pretending to be a merchant of strengthening spirit and the ally of mistaken tolerance. He had speedy, strange thoughts about what more you could get away with in this time. Time for heart and right and wrong to catch.
Let's go over here.
James was ready to travel to Archspire. He would adore a culture such as the dwarfs, he thought, like he liked visiting Paris or Madrid. Well, he was going to teleport. He was rich, rich of rivers of gold like gold rush connoisseurs, aficionados. The potion was golden and had a dwarf king on the lid. Smash! He exited a ring of osmium, onyx, and opal. Interesting. At Molten Plumes and Black Smokescape he saw a dwarf army. They were sons of Magellan, the first dwarf. They had thick plates of 5 times 10 centimeters, small plates chained together, over a chainmail. It was heavy and contemporary for the military. They couldn't see much through the helmets, just like the mounts. They were silvery and sleek like silk, reflecting a curious value. The silver was priced through crafting and generous deposits. They were riding on giant pot-belly pigs. Black and grey, their bellies were a centimeter off the ground. Curious asterisk smack asterisk asterisk smack asterisk smacking evolution. High cholesterol and cancer risk, just like their food, but they didn't live to be 150 like the dwarfs. Gnomes are related to dwarfs, not elves. Others had pikes, pole arms, legendary lances fiery and gemmed with blessings of Jinzok spirits of the mining deep, riding on armored bears with golden horns and somewhat golden spiked, and skull-round shields. The beards were fashionable, colored every color like a video game in its later seasons, thick outwards like it would be out of breath, and the stomach was thick, not finding its place. The animals jumped around obediently. There was not 100% communication, will and loyalty between the men and animals. What is your business here? The dwarf was intimidating with his 2-handed warhammer resting over his shoulder. Shopping. Don't go near the hearth of melting half-melt. I don't know where it is. Don't worry, it's in a restricted area. James scratched his head, walking a little bit as they rode on. He did not come to a spire, but downwards, a giant dwarven architectured hall. They had mined and delved over 3,000 years, one shovel at a time, timeless. Excavating like an eternal plan, like stopping dams. The city was partly built to the walls, into the walls of levels, underground, and then they delved even more deeper. 100,000 dwarfs lived in the deep and dank, feeding the cave beasts and ignoring the sun, its promise of serotonin. James went down giant stairs winding left, right, left, and left a bit off the wall. He would spiral down in what seemed like confined mage towers, logical districts for travel and sand. It left footprints that hold of unease. Lava stream lit the walls underfoot and similarly magically on the wall, like a lava lamp. Already there were corridors into the walls. Who knows how much of the city was built in there? 50 to 300% more? An infestation. Buildings stood out partly, piercing black and white, gleaming brass and modern ideas. They had different symbols, yet agreeable, golden, large and rectangular. Plateaus as well. You could drop a ball all the way down to the bottom. Maybe it would need to go out of sight. As far as he could see in this 4,000 diameter by 600 meter deep perfect hole, only disangled by buildings, there were pristine houses, holes of spee, bears, berserkers, fire elementals ruined and armored, fire elemental dragons, sulphurous dragons, half-dragon half-lizards, super-armored titanium dragons that spewed lava burning over time, runekeepers, dwarfs made and crushed runes for their powers in combat, and thanes. Halls of drinking before and after battle. Some hops grew next to distilleries even without the sun. There was dwarven beer and spirit of every kind. The famous names had their factories here, large and small competitive delicacy. Innate double liver bomb, Valhalla's Honed Six, Dungeon Master's Draft, Dragon Breath Whisker Purple and Auburn, Ogre's Foot, Underbite Assertiveness, Scottish Cayenne Espresso. It has some whiskey, but a commercial amount. Short Stack Lager, Boffy Ape, Alpaca Bitter, and the girthy Gargantuan. James passed many opportunities to drink. Eventually he settled in a place hunched over, watching a small street drinking that was a very hops-heavy and dark ale, Dwarf Guinness. Greasy Jaundice's barbecue joint and contemporary bar was white, dark gold and brown. It looked not too far from Japanese. At least there wasn't anything closer. They conned people of dwarf wares between the fish, and were pleasant to be around in their melancholic, mild sedation. Her sister and formaldehyde did the really greasy work, like Eagle Curry, licking her fingers. He was defeated analyzing his surrounding dwarfs. They had proper smitheries, melting every ore in double-efficient furnaces, technique that required less coal, hot like lasers and cold metalwork that still melted bars, molten sparkles and fire breath. Giant teal fires, magnesium green, pink-like. Thanes were big and fat, related to dwarfs. They were used in battle for their affiliation to air and fire magic and size. Chain lightning exerted from their weapons, fire walls, and immolation in their wake. They could swing and were ferocious despite being 2.5 meters tall and 2 meters wide, often shirtless and red-skinned. Spear-wielding berserkers feared no enemy exempt from tricks of the mind, except psychology, preventing their relentlessness, and with dwarf magic and helmets, they were immune to mind magic. They could go contemporary insane and fought sometimes with brass knuckles, katars. Runekeepers used ranged magic, magical excomets, reduced their resistance against dwarven strategies. They fireballed deadly and conjured mistily illusions. Many dwarfs summoned fire elementals with runes and potions. They could smash one each. They had mechanical artillery dwarfs more than bow and arrow, lots of siege weapons firing giant crossbows, which only downside was the aim. Scorpions, small trebuchets, armored mantlet, and fiery siege catapult shots for enemies not always forts. Dwarf king-headed rams. There were wall-climbing siege towers and explosive traps. Moving wood animals filled with TNT, combined with dwarven chemistry. Sometimes it was just excavation chemistry, thyme, and cilantro. At the bottom of the stairs felt like elevating the ground. He felt like in a different country, the energy from the earth and what carved rock laid above it. There were opulent, detailed grey and gold roads with more Japanese-looking gates. They had prospered from the wealth of the land. Luxurious capital was golden fortuitous. There were shops for dwarven craft. Tourists were here more than any other hole. Small girthy weapons, arbalist, expensive but fun-throwing potions. He went through wells that spiritually told of huge toad monsters and many craftsmen and armorists looking his way happily after customers for a few seconds. In the middle of the giant Chinese-looking dwarven square was a teleport hub, lodestone, and 6 bending spires into a lowering of elevation. It looked melted and some places frozen. Wizards and elves and cosmopolitan dwarfs teleported thus. Wizards were travelers, concerned with information and status. Maybe it was not for outsiders like him. Stranger hospitality is never 100% like friends. But it can be easy to become one with the elusive Vikings or Valkyries or dwarfs. People look for a kind of belonging and loyalty, sometimes without difficult testing. But it's the kind of loyalty that requires little speaking and simple answers, doesn't it? Concerning for a penetrating thinker like James, he would have a different testing, egregious and conscious of tricks, exciting and thorough. Loyalty done inefficient is auxiliary in thinking, like teenagers' best dwarf pop broadswords. Many people had indeed counted James among the loyal, trustworthy, and reliable, but he had been leisurely kind of, as a genius waiting for something more complicated and fitting. Loyalty is easy to some and for some, but if you're not honest about the process, you might be snuffed out all the same. Loyalty to friends is something more sacred for our character James, in this book.
Wow.
Underground were where it was, more luxurious halls, large of gold and grey iron, mixing of steel and rock, where grey and metallic looked sleek. Somewhat flat cobblestone, magical lightning roaring like a fissure, a land hidden from toll onlookers. Furnace-looking lightning down here was actually not furnaces. They made grand gorgeous. The holes could be 100 times 100 meters large and 50 meters off the ground, most luxury. Holes for dining 10 meters in roof. One table as a cross-fitted 200 people. Many of the houses were generous from a society quite never in recession because of the exports, grand
You're gonna
dining
have your
halls,
box in.
and rows of bunks in guest rooms with beds larger than humans. Rooms of tinkering, hobby and mounts, or dungeons of considerable creatures held captive. They had mastered fishing in the cave systems and might, deep-sea fishing platforms with magical merman harpoons, ballistas shooting heavy, considerably ugly fish. There were sailfish of three kinds, brown, light blue, and white blue. Fastest in the waters they were, muscular with just a tail, the water having seldom resistance. Delicious mag turtles of black colors and brown, cavefish pale and rare, nutritious and cheap. They had temples mostly golden, fit with capitalism or entire religious houses made of gold, combinations of other precious resources. Mined close. The main precious resources mine started in the middle and would go west, developing zones around it. The richest dwarfs lived in a gated community which James thought was concerning and offensive. Politically, he thought, was he not fine enough to live in a gated community like them? What problems did they have here? I guess riches make you more fine. They didn't care and would never care. As a bodybuilder giant like Ronnie Peanut Coleman James bent curious heads, barely fitting or crouching in less center capital, it seemed half of the time the architecture was considerably big enough for people like him, racist, spiteful history he was taught,
Ah,
hidden
this
when
is
not
something else
expected.
now.
Ronnie Coleman made James think insane thoughts, like getting up to eat during the night.
I'll look at some more YouTube videos. Blah 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 blah. Alright.
Ronnie Coleman
One
made
second.
James think insane thoughts, like getting up to eat during the night. Say lightweight to peanut-sized 400-kilogram squats, and that's heavyweight cons equally. It made perfect sense. A small-town cop like him with genetics so good he won professional bodybuilding competitions without steroids was one of James' idols. He connected mind and body, lightweight and peanut. Leg pressing 550 kilograms. James could only do a few times actually. Now there was a way of steroids and human monsters without the consequences, time to become limitless. The time was thus, he would live to be big, as biceps and personality. To a clock where the miners and smithers clock into work, he asked for Albert the Starsmith. They said at the end of the Hellforge Auburn 7.5, sky searching. James went through the mining district. It was white sleek steel and white, colored as sand. They had industrious pits of mithril, coal, dragonbane, and gold, everything grand and moving consciously, until everything was gone. There was dragonbane abyss black, excellent weapons against shapeshifters, gemstones containing purple sapphire, ruby even dragon crystal, something they exported to elves so they could make crystal potions. 3 potions in one. Only dragon crystal like red granite was good enough for them. While mining the granite, you could just drop it on the ground. It seeped through and slowly into treadmills underground, being small to roof even for dwarfs. Together they made drinking horns, replenishing mana that never could be fully drunk as long as there were seas. About 10% were retained, being drunk to the generous end. There were walls of sandstone 3 kinds and clay. Dwarfs mined on ropes and stairs made in the material, or they had small carts hanging on ropes that were fit for elevating. To warn miners of toxic air that went through the mines and pockets, and the season they had not small songbirds but the giant, yellow, almost golden pigeon. Dwarfs could ride it although they were shuffled off in it. They enjoyed the deep deeply over the white steel slopes. Things turned pretty damp and more dangerous in the unspoken deep. So thoroughly truly in there you found air no one has breathed, smelly and dank. Dinosaur-like creatures breathing fire and acid, like the headbutt hunk smashing its head, though pretty much no aggravation, related to goats or the presumptuous piss ape. Your mind weakened as greed filled the insane membrane, with pressure in the skull and your best sanity timer. Dwarfs were reasonable delving through, knowing just when to keep sanity and be productive like straightforward, but would try again deeper after resetting, gathering safely the previous step. They mungered sanity sobriety potions, dependent and angry at the economy. They had gone deep, insanity tests the confident like sin. Flowing gold,